Okay, so picture this scene. You're sitting in a conference room.
Oh boy,
Yeah, you know the one. It's like 4:00 p.m. on a Thursday.
the worst time.
The absolute worst. The project is totally behind schedule, the budget is blown, and the loudest voices in the room are basically just panic shouting ideas at a whiteboard.
Right, the classic, let's just pivot right now, or
That's
let's launch early.
exactly, just frantic, chaotic energy. But then, if you look over to the corner of the table, there's always that one person who hasn't said a single word for like 20 minutes. And they aren't checking their phone, they aren't rolling their eyes, they're just watching.
Just absorbing it all.
Right. And when they finally do speak, they don't shout. They just ask one quiet, terrifyingly accurate question.
Yes.
The kind of question that makes everyone in the room suddenly realize the great new plan is actually totally illegal or, physically impossible.
They are the invisible line of defense.
That is exactly who we're talking about today. Welcome to the deep dive. We were looking at the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report, and we have a very specific mission today. We are analyzing a profile known as the SAWN Resilient Guardian.
It's a really fascinating profile to dig into.
It is, and I have to say, looking at the sources we have for this deep dive, this might actually be the most undervalued person in the modern workforce.
I would definitely agree with that. It really challenges our traditional view of what leadership looks like.
How so?
Well, we usually think of leaders or influencers as the people making the most noise, right? The visionaries. But the resilient guardian holds power through silence.
Okay, so before we get into the specifics of why they're so quiet and what makes them tick, let's just briefly set the stage with the tool we're using.
Sure.
Because we're looking at this through the lens of the Max Energy ME80 system. For anyone who isn't familiar with the source material, how is this different from, say, a standard Myers-Briggs or a standard personality test?
Think of the ME80 system like an MRI for your personality's energy. Most assessments out there, they basically take a photograph of your behavior. They look at what you do. But the ME80 looked at the energy flow behind why you do it.
The underlying mechanics.
Exactly. It breaks down how a person processes values, how they process emotions, and how they make decisions internally before they ever take a single external action.
So it's looking at the engine, not just the paint job.
That's a great way to put it. And today's engine, the Resilient Guardian, is built for a very specific, very critical purpose.
Let's talk about that purpose. The report has this hero section that defines their core identity. And I just want to quote this directly because it's so evocative.
Go for it.
It describes them as, quote, holding the line at the edge of rules, resisting disorder with quiet resilience.
Resisting disorder. That right there is the key phrase.
Yeah.
Their primary drive isn't necessarily to win in the aggressive competitive sense. It's to prevent collapse. They act as the immune system of a team or a company.
The immune system.
Right. They detect the virus, the bad idea, the risky shortcut, way before anyone else even feels the symptoms.
But here's the paradox I found in the reading. The report talks a lot about their defensive insight and their extremely high sense of responsibility. But it also explicitly says they don't initiate conflict easily.
Right.
So if they see the building is on fire, why are they whispering? Why not sound the alarm?
That is probably the biggest misconception people have about this profile. They aren't whispering because they're shy or because they're passive. They are whispering because they value stability above everything else.
I'm not sure I follow. Explain that a bit more.
Okay, imagine you're driving a car on a sheet of black ice.
Okay, terrifying. Go on.
If you hit a patch of ice, the worst possible thing you can do is slam on the brakes or jerk the steering wheel.
Right, you'll spin out.
Exactly. That's what the loud reactive types do. They panic. The resilient guardian is the driver who just takes their foot off the gas, makes a microscopic adjustment to the steering wheel, and smoothly keeps the car in the lane. The passengers in the back seat might not even realize they almost died.
So their silence or their quietness is actually a control mechanism.
Precisely. It is control through subtle adjustments. Their entire control philosophy is to maintain the most basic reasonableness and safety boundaries.
They don't want to rock the boat.
Right. If the system is already shaking, they don't want to shake it more by screaming. They just want to stabilize the existing structure. They are quite literally the last invisible line of defense.
That makes so much sense. But I really want to know how that engine actually works on the inside.
Let's pop the hood.
Yeah. The ME80 report breaks this down into an energy matrix, which is basically 4 layers of how they process the world.
We have the IP, IQ, EQ, and the manifestation layer.
And for the resilient guardian, the report sums up their general energy characteristic as defensive offense. which sounds like a football strategy.
It fits perfectly, though. Their internal logic is completely defensive. Protect the rules, protect the company, avoid risk. But their external action is offensive. They take highly impactful actions to fix things.
Let's look at the layers one by one, because this is where you really start to see the nuance of this profile.
Absolutely.
So layer one is the IP, or the inner value layer. The definition here is stable accumulation activation. Now, when I hear accumulation, I think of hoarding. What are they accumulating?
Value, competence, trust.
Okay.
See, some profiles operate on flash energy, combustion. They want to burn bright and fast, have the big disruptive idea, and move on. The resilient guardian operates on battery energy.
Slow and steady.
Yes. They are storing up value over time. They believe in consistency. They gather their strength, their resources, and their credibility slowly. It's a slow burn, but it burns incredibly hot and long.
So they definitely aren't the fake it till you make it types.
Oh, they despise that phrase. They're building a massive reservoir of competence that they can draw from when things go wrong. They don't want to be the star for 15 minutes. They want to be the load-bearing pillar for 15 years.
Wow. Okay, that brings us to layer two, which is the IQ, or the emotional activation layer. And this one really threw me for a loop.
Let me guess. Structure and principle judgment.
Yes. Usually when we hear emotional activation, we think of actual feelings. Sadness, joy, anger. But the report says their emotion is structure.
This is hands down the hardest part for other people to understand about the resilient guardian. We are taught to think that logic and emotion are opposites. For this profile, they are totally fused.
Give me a vivid example of how that works in real life.
Okay. Imagine someone breaks a really fundamental rule in a spreadsheet, or someone skips a mandatory safety protocol just because they're feeling lazy that day.
To me, that's just annoying. Maybe a bit sloppy.
Right. But to a resilient guardian, that feels like a deeply personal insult. It triggers a visceral emotional reaction in them. Chaos is their emotional trigger.
Interesting.
They physically feel wrongness in their gut when core principles are violated.
So when they get emotional, it doesn't look like crying or yelling.
No, it looks like stiffness, coldness. If you see a resilient guardian go suddenly very quiet and rigid, you haven't just made a simple mistake. You have violated their sense of order. Their feelings are inextricably tied to the integrity of the system.
That explains so much. I've definitely worked with people where I thought, why are they getting so worked up over a filing error? But for them, the filing error is a crack in the foundation.
Exactly. It isn't just a file. It's a symptom of impending disorder, and they are allergic to disorder.
Okay, so we have a heavily logical emotional trigger. Then we move to layer 3, the EQ, or decision calculation layer. And here the report says, quote, emotional perception and resonance.
Yes.
Wait, didn't we just establish that they are extremely logical? Now we're talking about emotional resonance.
So then this is their secret weapon. This is why they are guardians and not just mindless robots. They actually have a very sophisticated internal radar for how decisions land in the room. They calculate the human cost.
So they use empathy as data.
In a way, yes. They ask themselves, if we enforce this strict new compliance rule right now, will the team revolt? Is the timing reasonable? They are constantly calibrating.
Okay.
They use that EQ layer to predict the emotional fallout of a purely logical decision.
So they have the logic to see the error from the IQ layer and the emotional intelligence to know exactly how to fix it without causing a riot from the EQ layer.
Exactly. They are always looking for a safe landing. They want to fix the problem without breaking the people in the process.
Which leads us directly to the final layer, layer 4, the manifestation layer, energy released outward.
This is where the rubber meets the road. All that intense internal processing, the accumulation, the structural judgment, the emotional calculation, it all results in tangible, impactful action.
They fix things.
Yes. They don't just sit around complaining about the leak in the boat. They patch the pipe.
I want to zoom in on a specific inner trait mentioned in the deep dive sources because I think it's the most defining behavior of this entire profile. It's called silent resistance.
Such a powerful concept. The metaphor the report uses is perfect. Don't flip the table, but don't give in either.
I feel like we have all witnessed this. The meeting is going completely off the rails, someone suggests a terrible, risky idea, and the resilient guardian doesn't stand up and shout no.
They never do. Instead, they ensure that safe landing we talked about. They might say something very calm like, okay, interesting idea. To execute that properly, we first need to fill out these 3 risk assessment forms, check the compliance logs with legal, and run a 6-week beta test.
They literally suffocate the bad idea with process.
Or they guide it to a safe, quiet death. They express their position through precise corrections of execution details.
Wow.
It's basically death by 1,000 cuts for a terrible idea, but it can act as life support for a risky but good one. Small, continuous pullback actions are way more effective to them than direct confrontation.
But does that mean they don't have an opinion? That they're just pushing paper?
Not at all. And the ME80 report is very clear on this clarification. Their silence does not mean they have no opinion. It is a highly strategic choice.
Okay.
They are preserving the dignity of the team and the standards of the work without destroying the greater situation. They are basically trying to save you from yourself without embarrassing you in front of the boss.
That sounds completely exhausting, just constantly holding back the tide but trying to make it look effortless.
It is incredibly draining, and that leads us directly to the shadow blind spot of this profile.
Every superhero has a weakness.
And for the resilient guardian, it is internal friction buildup.
The pressure cooker.
Exactly. Because their mechanism for dealing with irrationality is cold handling, they suppress their own dissatisfaction to keep the peace and maintain order. But basic physics tells us that energy doesn't just disappear, it accumulates inside.
And what happens when the pressure finally gets too high?
Two things can happen. Either an eruption, which is very rare but totally terrifying when it happens, or, much more likely, complete withdrawal.
The sudden resignation. The I'm done moment that absolutely nobody saw coming.
Yes. The core pain for them is this endless, exhausting pulling match between maintaining order for the group and insisting on self.
Yeah.
If the group becomes too chaotic, or if they feel their constant efforts to maintain stability are just being ignored or taken for granted, their investment drops. They eventually choose self-preservation and they just check out.
And usually that's exactly when the system collapses. Because they were the ones secretly holding it up the whole time.
Precisely. You don't know what they were doing until they stop doing it.
Let's pivot to the social side of things. What is it actually like to be friends with them or to work with them every day? The report calls their social style principal distance.
Principal distance. It sounds a bit chilly, doesn't it?
A little bit, yeah.
It basically means they aren't necessarily warm in the traditional fuzzy sense. They aren't the ones organizing the office happy hour or gossiping in the break room.
But they're the ones you call when you actually need real help.
Exactly. They are rarely the social center of a group, but they're the most loyal rule followers. The report notes this really interesting double-edged sword. Colleagues feel a deep sense of reliability with them, but they also feel pressure.
Pressure? Why would they feel pressure from someone so quiet?
Because you know they are watching. The resilient guardian is a human lie detector for incompetence.
Oh, man.
If you are slacking off, or if you are cutting corners, you know that they know. Even if they don't say a single word, you feel that undeniable correction in their gaze.
It keeps everyone on their toes.
It really does. They're quietly observing the reasonableness of every decision, and they will offer those undeniable corrections at critical moments. It's very hard to slack off when the guardian is in the room.
So translating that into business value, if I'm a CEO or a hiring manager, why do I desperately need a SAWN resilient guardian on my team?
The report gives them a great moniker for the business world. System leak monitors.
Which is such a valuable role. Every single company needs someone who can spot a leak before the boat sinks.
Their core advantage is being a detail gatekeeper and a risk reminder. While all the visionaries are staring up at the clouds, the resilient guardian is looking at the ground to make sure nobody walks off a cliff.
They value feasibility over slogans.
Exactly. They serve as the organization's quality valve. They prevent the system from losing control.
The report suggests some specific recommended career fields for them. Risk control and compliance seem pretty obvious.
Yes, internal audits, risk alerts, anything where the fundamental question is this actually allowed? But also quality assurance. They make incredible technical standard gatekeepers because they capture the cracks at the execution end.
There was one recommendation in the source material that surprised me a bit. High-pressure operations.
Ah, yes.
Because we just spent all this time saying they like stability and order. Why would they excel in a highly turbulent, high-pressure environment?
They do like stability. That is exactly why they are so good in high pressure. Because they act as a stability pivot.
A stability pivot.
Think of an air traffic controller or an ER triage nurse. Chaos is everywhere, everything is spinning, but they stand perfectly still. They create this little pocket of order that allows everyone else around them to function without panicking.
That makes perfect sense. And of course, the report mentions professional support roles requiring extreme professional ethics. You absolutely want this personality type handling your company's money or your legal compliance.
100%. You trust them because their loyalty is to the principle itself, not just to a person. They won't cook the books just because the boss asks them to.
So we've unpacked the identity, the energy matrix, the inner traits, the social style, and the career path. But I want to close on what the report calls the gold sentence. It felt very poignant to me.
It's a really powerful final insight.
It says resilient guardians don't need tolerance. They need to be truly seen.
That is the heart of it. Often these people are labeled as stubborn or inflexible or just the quiet person in the corner. People just tolerate their corrections. They roll their eyes and say, oh, there goes Dave again with the compliance regulations. But they don't appreciate the massive amount of internal energy that person is spending to keep everyone safe.
And the report adds something crucial for the rest of us. The irrationality this personality points out is a warning sign for system health.
If a resilient guardian is taking the time to tell you something is wrong, you need to listen. Not because they are being negative, but because they are your canary in the coal mine. Their silence when they are working alongside you is not agreement. It is another form of persistence. They are persisting in keeping the system alive.
It really makes you rethink how we view the quiet ones in our organizations. They aren't disengaged. They are arguably the most engaged people in the room, just in a way that doesn't actively seek the spotlight.
And if you are a resilient guardian listening to this deep dive right now, we see you. Your ability to hold the line is rare and it is vital. But remember to watch that internal friction. Don't let the pressure cooker explode. Find a safe way to vent that steam.
Absolutely. This has been such an eye-opening look into the SAWN Resilient Guardian, and it leads me to a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. We've talked about how essential these guardians are for a company. But what happens to a broader society that completely ignores or talks over its guardians until it's too late? What systems are we currently letting crack because we prefer the loud slogans over the quiet, feasible corrections?
That is a very big question to leave them with.
It is, but that's what we do here. Now, we mentioned at the top that all of the insights in today's deep dive came directly from the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report. It is a genuinely fascinating system for understanding yourself and the people you work with.
If this resonated with you today, maybe because you are this profile, or maybe you suddenly realize you work with one, there is so much more to explore in the full framework.
There really is. If you want to dig deeper and see the source material for yourself, you can visit their official website at www.maxenergylife.com. Or you can easily search for Max Energy or Med Energy on Facebook to find their community and resources.
It's highly recommended. Understanding the hidden energy behind a personality really does change how you see everyone around you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Next time you're in a frantic meeting and someone offers a quiet, logical correction that basically saves the entire day, maybe just give them a nod. They'll know exactly what it means.
Until next time.
Catch you later.